the epilogue to the new edition of The Shallows that I mentioned, you cite a very interesting claim from an article in Scientific American that I was unaware of, and I confess I didn't go track down. But you say that the argument of this article was that people finding instant information from their mobile devices, from their smartphones, can mistake the power of the device for their own mental capacities, leading to a wonderful phrase, delusions of intelligence, you say, which raises an interesting question of if you knew everything that's on the internet, would that be intelligence? But leaving that question aside, you then propose the idea that perhaps this is why fake ideas, crazy conspiracy theories thrive on the internet, because everyone thinks he or she knows everything. They've got it in their pocket.
That's right. And the authors of that article, the way they summed it up is that we seem to be entering a time when people will think they know more about the world, even though they continually know less about the world. Because there's a very big difference in finding information online, Googling up information, and actually taking information into your mind and weaving it together with everything else you know. That's what creates personal knowledge, all those associations and connections between information. And those seem to be sacrificed when we just browse online and grab information. And what I think happens, and this is my theory anyway, is that we begin to lose our powers of discernment or have them blunted. And it becomes harder and harder for us to recognize what is true, what's reliable, and what's simply false, but that might fit with our preconceptions. So I think as a result of that, we've entered this crisis of gullibility, where people are more likely to believe stuff that is either distorted or simply untrue because they don't have a frame of reference, a frame of knowledge and internal intelligence to pass the new information through. And also, they're more likely to circulate that information, repost it, retweet it, in order to show off their own intelligence and knowledge, even though it's distorted and often wrong.
What about the idea that excessive exposure to the toxic screen will ultimately limit your choices and rule out Kant, because you can't read it anymore. You've lost the ability to concentrate.
I mean, toxic and assault are perfect sort of words to, I think, press on a little bit. It seems always a bit dangerous to introduce physical metaphors like the poison metaphor to what is a symbolic order. I mean, we have to, as we're talking, keep ever present that, while I feel like I can see your face, I'm seeing really a representation of the face. I'm hearing a representation of the sound signal when you're talking. So there's not much chance that I could poison you through the screen, or that anything the screen is doing could poison you with words, images, music, sound. And there's like a not great history of thinking that, 19th century novels could poison the minds of young women. Literally that word poison all the time, toxic, intoxicating. They could make them sexual. There were worries that people, realist art would be so mesmerizing. There are always stories that the birds peck themselves to death on images because they're so realistic, or with the Lumiere brothers, that the train was going to hit them off the screen. And these things are ways of heightening the savor that, maybe in this massively multiplayer online role-playing game, you'll really believe you're a cleric, that somehow that it's going to reach out and grab you is, I think, a little bit of a scare tactic. That said, I have modified my position on this, and I do see particular physical dangers, not occult brain dangers, but dangers to vision, which I've been writing about now, to the fact that we're always recruiting the same muscles to look at our phones, cuts down on our peripheral vision and lots of other kind of moral senses that go with that. And then, of course, we're losing hearing with headphones, which is very alarming in kids. And then there's the hyperstimulation that's a somewhat different subject, but has been part of the internet from the beginning and may even be connected to a kind of semi-seizure response to screens.
I want you to talk about something you write in your memoir. You quote a young woman who you describe as an early Facebook enthusiast, who explained her lack of concern about access to details about her online by asking rhetorically, who would care about me and my little life? And you write this: now we know the answer. When we are online and when we are tracked by our devices, our lives are bought and sold in bits and pieces to the highest bidder and for any purpose. When I first considered that question, who would care about me and my little life, it led me to ask whether we could have intimacy without privacy and whether we could have democracy without privacy. I argued that the answer was no, but I thought of them as two separate questions. I had a lot to learn.
Yes.
What did you learn about intimacy, privacy, and democracy?
Well, when I first started studying this, I thought that those were two separate questions. In other words, that Facebook was scraping your data. That was bad. Mm-hmm. And then there was a whole separate issue about polling and about influencing people in terms of their voting. Well, that was a problem. And over time, the kind of fact that we live in a surveillance society where, the way I see it now, intimacy, privacy, and democracy are in a kind of golden triangle, where the most important thing to teach our children is that you cannot have intimacy without privacy, you cannot have democracy without privacy, you cannot have, that these three, that surveillance will undermine privacy and democracy. And I think we've seen that. I think the pandemic, as we've watched this year, in which we've seen really a crisis in democracy, we've seen people have become more aware of what social media can do. I think we've seen that more people become aware that of this golden triangle and of how much work we have to do to make ourselves whole again and protect ourselves. I think it's really the number one educational issue. And yet in my interviews, because I'm an honest interviewer, I report what I hear, young people will still say, Facebook is my free luxury. It's my free luxury. And they don't allow themselves to make the connection of what it's taking from them. Or they'll say something really off the point of this connection when they say, I don't mind being shown pictures for ballet slippers because, I like it that Facebook knows that I like that kind of ballet slipper. Mm-hmm. So educating people about this complex connection, really I see as the major, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, no matter what your politics is, we have to get this under control because, one of my favorite lines in all the things I've ever written was something I wrote for a TED Talk that said, just because we grew up with the internet, we think the internet is all grown up. And and people say, oh no, the horse is out of the barn, it's too late. It's, the internet is still young enough that we need to get this under control because I think our democracy really depends on it.